Hey there, hope all is well. Back at you today with some more RTD news updates. And as always, if you find today's articles to be informative as well as educational, I want to encourage you to share these with our family and friends so that they can become more aware on what's happening around them, dealing with monetary issues as well as the economy in general. And if you're new to RTD, click the subscribe button for more RTD interviews and news updates. Let's get into today's articles. Today's news articles has to do with the current devaluation in Egypt and just taking somewhat of a little closer look as to what's happening in Egypt and kind of drawing some comparisons to how the same policies that are in play there and the same school of thought that's at work behind the central bank and their government, how it kind of ties into here in America with the dollar. And so the couple articles here, first one being from The Guardian, Egypt devalues currency by 48% to meet the IMF demands for a 12 billion loan. The next article is Egypt ETF tumbles 18% on currency devaluation. The next article is from Mada Messer. It's an Arabian news publication, but it's a closer look at what's going on the ground. It says devaluing the Egyptian pound, a closer look. And then the last article here is an older article, but it's in reference to the dollar, and it's Decrowning the Dollar, written by Michael Pinto back in 2013, but it's very applicable to what's happening in Egypt, in my opinion. So let's get into the first article. So here we have the first article out of The Guardian, just came out today, and it says Egypt devalues currency by 48% to meet the IMF demands for a 12 billion loan. And then it says the Egyptian pound will be allowed to float as government struggles with worst economic crisis in decades. And so here it shows money exchanger here swapping out these pounds for whatever he's doing here. Look like more pounds. But just to get into this, and this is in my point of view, a very interesting story that you really won't hear on mainstream news right now because everything is politically based here in the United States based upon the election. But here's the underlying problems of every country. It's the fiat currencies that are robbing the people blind and starving children because of all these policies that are in play against the public. So just to give you an idea what this article is about, it says Egypt has devalued its currency by 48% and announced that it will allow it to float. Measures that meet a key demand by the International Monetary Fund in order to secure a 12 billion loan over 3 years to overhaul its ailing economy. The evaluation pegged the Egyptian current pound at 13 to the dollar, up from nearly 9 on the official market. A central bank auction of dollars will be held later on Thursday, allowing supply and demand to determine the value of the pound for the first time in decades. So let me stop. So I actually went to the currency exchange XC.com to kind of see what that would look like via graph. And as of now, it hasn't even really registered on the currency exchange page, and so it still has it at 1 to 9 or 9 to 1, and that's just the official government numbers. But yet from prior articles and in previous interview or videos I posted, the actual black market rate for a dollar amongst the public is closer to 18, maybe 20. And so if they're going to move it up artificially to 13 based upon what the government says, it's good to say that in this actual streets, for people to actually try to get a hold of dollars is probably going to 20 or 30, if not more, just because it's going to become that much tighter for the people, which means it makes it more difficult for them to be able to afford things. And so here it says the evaluation was virtually certain to cause a steep hike in prices, piling pressure on the Abdel Fattah al-Sisi's government to avoid a popular backlash against its handling of the economy. So it says the evaluation was virtually certain to cause a steep hike in prices. So like I was mentioning, prices is going to shoot through the roof, and getting hold of dollars is going to become that much harder for the public. It says Sisi has repeatedly urged Egyptians in recent weeks to rally behind him as he grapples with the country's worst economic crisis in decades, arguing that there was no way out of the economic crisis unless Egypt's endure and be patient. Sisi, a general turned president election in 2014, has pledged to do all he can to protect Egypt's poor from the inflationary fallout that is certain to come with economic reforms. Last week, he said the military would distribute a one-off package of basic food items such as sugar and rice at half price among poor Egyptians. Also on Thursday, the central bank raised by 3 percentage points its two key overnight interest rates. The bank said the measures were part of the government's reform program and designed to completely end the unofficial currency market. The measures, it said, would empower the Egyptian economy to face the present challenges, unleash its potential, and achieve the hoped for growth. The flotation is an excellent overdue step. Thank God we took it. The Egyptian business tycoon Najib Saris wrote on Twitter, "We must all help to make this step a process." Now, here's one of the problems with the loan from the IMF and this, business tycoon referencing how great of a plan this was. If you have money and you're able to get access to dollars, it makes Egyptian goods and services and property and things like that, cheap for you. It basically everything's on sale if you have money, because it's easier to, buy up goods and services, buy up buildings, buy up real estate, buy up whatever you want if you actually have dollars or lots of Egyptian pounds. But for the majority of the population, which is living in poverty, they don't have the necessary means on their own to feed themselves, nevertheless, to take advantage of this devaluation. And so I think it's one of the IMF primary scams is to loan money to a country that can't afford to pay it back. And so what they do is they'll ask for certain natural rich resources or land and things like that, basically loaning to then withdraw natural and real tangible things. So interesting article. If you're interested, it's more to come. Read it below. Here's an article from Barron's, just released today, and it says Egypt ETF tumbles 18% on currency devaluation. And it's a short article, but just to give you an idea what's going on. It says the National Bank of Egypt on Thursday announced it is devaluing its currency, the pound, by nearly half to close the door on a black market for the dollars. The VanEck Vectors Egypt Index Exchange Traded Fund, EGPT, tumbled 18% at the opening of U.S. trading. Also, keep an eye on the U.S. traded shares of Commercial International Bank, Egypt, CIBEY. The ETF was down 3% this year, while shares of the bank were down 8% in the U.S. trading this year. The central bank said the U.S. dollar can be purchased for 13 Egyptian pounds and sold for $13.50 versus a prior rate near $8 or $8.88. The Wall Street Journal reports allowing the pound to move freely against the dollar is one of the several conditions Egypt needs to meet to secure a 3-year International Monetary Fund loan of $12 billion approved in August. The IMF said allowing markets forces to govern the currency will make Egypt's exports more competitive, draw tourism, and attract foreign investment. That in turn should boost the economy and create a strong external position for the country, according to IMF via Wall Street Journal. So just the idea that a loan to someone who can't repay it is supposed to put them in a better position is absolute stupidity, is absolute craziness, in my opinion. How can loaning someone money boost their economy and make them better off when they can't afford to even make their bills today, nevertheless pay that back? So once again, another IMF monetary scam that the world lives under. So interesting. If you're interested, it's below. Here's an article here from a Middle Eastern news publication, and it gives a closer look as to what actually is happening on the ground, and from a professor in Cairo, Egypt. And it says devaluing the Egyptian pound, a closer look. And so just to scroll down, it gives you basically information of what's been happening up to this point. And then it talks about regulated and unregulated goods. And it says the devaluation of the pound will have an impact on the prices of regulated goods, Alfrey says. Just to give an idea who Alfrey is. Financial services, Mubashir Financial Services is this company here, whatever. The valuation of the pound will have an impact on prices of regulated goods, Alfred says, which were previously set based on the exchange rate. Although with the black market rate currently 13 to 14 pounds per dollar, this is a little bit of an older article last month, the valuation will not affect unregulated goods and services much as long as dollars are available. Professor of economics at Cairo University, Amina Helmi, says the devaluation of the pound is guaranteed to affect the prices of basic commodities. The government must find a way to ration imports and increase capital flows in order to offset the hardships Egyptian citizens already face, she argues. Mohammed Abu Basha, an economic economist working for EFG Herm said the effect of the currency devaluation on Egypt citizens depends on their reliance on subsidies. If you are a family that has access to goods to and depends on subsidized goods, these costs won't increase. But other families that do not have such access will find that their costs will increase quite a bit, he explains. Egypt also faces many shortages in essential medicines, which has been closely linked to the dollar crisis. While AFI maintains the accessibility of medicine and food are government priorities, Helmi argues that the state must establish mechanisms to foster healthy competition from the private sector. If the government allows the private sector to contribute, it can ensure shortages in medicine are averted. And then it goes here, talks about imports, exports, and subsidies. Generally speaking, currency devaluation can contribute to higher export rates as goods become more economically competitive in international markets, but purchasing power often diminishes as international goods become more expensive. Alfie warns devaluation or flotation of the pound will not be a positive move for Egypt, as it is a net importer that relies on substantial food imports such as grain to feed the population. Egypt must turn from being a consuming to a producing nation, he says, adding that exports will not increase much with devaluation unless high quality goods are produced that are competitive with other countries. If there is a significant increase in the purchasing cost of imported goods, such as wheat, it would have a noticeable impact on the cost of subsidies. So basically, the idea of free floating the currency will not help the people overall. It only harm them and make them more dependent upon the government to basically prop things up and to keep everybody somewhat happy as best they can. So, interesting perspective. If you're interested in reading it, the article's below. So here's the last article from the Huffington Post from 2013, and it's entitled "Decrowning the Dollar." And one thing that kind of interested me in this article and wanting to share it was the idea that the whole Egyptian crisis has to do with a central bank who kind of oversees and runs the money supply for the country of Egypt, and the government has gone through a lot of turmoil with coups and all types of things happening within their government to the point where the people are starving and they're broke, and the money that they're using, or the fiat currency that's unbacked by anything, is basically just becoming even more of just worthless paper and ink. And so they, being a pretty much a small economy, having their local domestic currency being only used by them for the most part and not having reserve status makes their process of pain and suffering a lot more impactful. Just the fact that the devaluation happened overnight and just the amount of chaos it's caused. And this is all happening in a short period of time. Whereas here in the United States, with the Federal Reserve and the devaluing of the dollar throughout the last 100 years, it kind of shows that we have a reserve currency status, so it allows us to kind of get away from some things and allow time to go on, and people really not notice the idea that there's a mandated 2% inflation, which is basically 2% devaluation on the dollar, and for it to happen, basically annually until something drastically happens, kind of shows that we are able to get by and not really pay attention to events such as what's happening in Egypt, because we're the reserve currency of the world thus far. But this article here kind of challenges that in a sense, where Michael Pinto, who's a very he's a great analyst slash commentator of events, and this was written in 2013, as I mentioned, but it talks about the decrowning of the dollar and how at this point in time it was beginning to become obvious that how the devaluation of the dollar and the decrowning of the dollar, as he puts it, is apparent and underway, and we're in the midst of it now. And the pain that's being experienced in Egypt and in Venezuela, Nigeria, and all those other countries that are having immediate impact felt from their devaluation, the pain they're feeling is kind of what's going to be felt in the United States with the dollar, but yet, in my opinion, on a much, much, much greater, deeper, more painful level, because it is a reserve currency. So here's the thoughts here. I'll let you determine what you think. It says the gradual erosion of the U.S. dollar status as the world's reserve currency has been greatly hastened as of late. This is due not only to the perpetual gridlock in D.C., but also our government's inability to articulate a strategy to deal with the 126 trillion of unfunded liabilities. And so right now, this is 126. 3 years ago, it's closer to 2, according to a couple other analysts. So it's gotten worse. Our addictions to debt and cheap money have finally caused our major international creditors to call for an end to dollar hegemony and to push for a de-Americanized world. China, the largest U.S. creditor with 1.2 trillion in treasury bonds, recently put out a commentary through the state-run news agency stating that such alarming days when the destinies of others are in the hands of a hypocritical nation have to be terminated. In addition, Japan, our second largest creditor holding 1.14 trillion, put out a statement through its finance minister last week saying the U.S. must avoid a situation where it cannot pay and its AAA rating plunges all of a sudden. It is both embarrassing and hypocritical to be lectured by Japan about intractable debt situation. However, the sad truth is we have become completely reliant on these two nations for the stability of our bond market and currency. We arrived at this condition because our central bank has compelled the nation to rely on asset bubbles for growth and prevented the deleveraging of the economy by forcing down interest rates far below a market-based level. For example, instead of allowing debt levels to shrink, the Fed's virtual free money has now caused consumer credit to surge past 3 trillion mark. This is back in Q2, as in 2013. That is up 22% in the past 3 years since the whole recession, depression, crisis happened. And of course, the federal government massively stepped up its borrowing beginning in 2008, piling on 6.8 trillion in additional publicly traded debt since the Great Recession. So as of now, that number is closer to 10. So just as you see, just from the 3 years, how things have really gotten out of hand in a debt sense. Because while most are now celebrating the end of government gridlock, the truth is few understand the consequences of our addictions. The real problems of government, largest money printing, artificial interest rates, asset bubbles, and debt have not been addressed at all. Rather, Washington has merely agreed to perpetually extend its line of credit and to have the central banks purchase most of all that debt. Instead of placating the fears of our foreign creditors, we have cemented into their minds that the U.S. dollar and bond market cannot be safe repositories of their savings. The eventual inevitable loss of that confidence will ensure nothing less than surging prices and a complete collapse of our economy. The fear of a meltdown was the genesis of the constitutional-based third-party political movement. The Tea Party was formed to prevent runaway inflation and economic depression resulting from a crumbling currency and devalued debt. It appears by the absolute and universal vilification of its members by both Republicans and Democrats indicates the U.S. citizens are not yet ready to undergo the pain associated with removal of our pernicious addictions. Since there appears to be no political solution in sight, it would benefit investors to take steps now to protect their portfolios from the decrowning of the U.S. dollar as the world's reserve currency. So this is 2013, and as you can see from all the numbers I read, things have gotten a lot worse. So he's basically painting a picture of, on a grander scale, of what's currently happening in all these smaller nations where no one seems to care, the mainstream media won't talk about it, but yet it's real pain that people feel because it has to do with the purchasing of goods and services when your fiat currency or paper is no longer able to, it no longer is able to purchase these things because it becomes worth less and less. So sorry about the rant, but I just, I'm very interested in the subject matter. So share with me your thoughts below. I would love to hear your thoughts on this, on Egyptian crisis and what's happening currently. Let me know, if you enjoyed these articles. Other than that, have a good day. See you later.